circle be unbroken? By and by, Lord, by and by, there's a better home awaiting in the sky, Lord, in the sky. Will the circle be unbroken? By and by, Lord, by and by, there's a better home awaiting in the sky, Lord, in the sky.
They teach us to read in black and white. Truth is this, the rest is false. You are whole or broken. Who you love is acceptable or not. Life tells its truth in many hues.
Will the circle be unbroken? By and by, Lord, by and by, there's a better home awaiting in the sky, Lord, in the sky.
We are taught to think in either or, to believe in the teachings of Jesus or Buddha, to believe in human potential, or in a power beyond a single will. I am broken. I am powerful. Life embraces multiple truths, speaks of both, end of end.
Will the circle be unbroken? By and by, Lord, by and by, there's a better home awaiting in the sky, Lord, in the sky.
We are taught to see in absolutes, good versus evil, male versus female, old versus young, gay versus straight. Let us see the fractions, the spectrum, the margins. Let us open our hearts to the complexity of our world. Let us make our lives sanctuaries to nurture our many identities.
Will the circle be unbroken? By and by, Lord, by and by, there's a better home awaiting in the sky, Lord, in the sky.
The day is coming when all will know that the rainbow world is more glorious than monochrome, that a river of identities can ebb and flow over the static, stubborn rocks in its course, that the margins will hold the center.
Will the circle be unbroken? By and by, Lord, by and by, there's a better home awaiting in the sky, Lord, in the sky. Will the circle be unbroken? By and by, Lord, by and by, there's a better
A Chalice Lighting for When Things Aren't Okay by Molly Brewer. My beloved people, I cannot pretend, and so I will not tell you that everything is okay right now, that there is no reason to be angry, that you must be optimistic or at peace. I cannot pretend these things, and so I won't tell them to you. But now our chalice is lit, and so all I ask in this moment is that we remember the words of Rebecca Parker. There is a love. There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all. By the light of our chalice, let us rest in this love. Let us rest in this love. There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all that we love. There is a love holding all. We rest in this love. There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all holding us. There is a love holding all that we love. There is a love holding all holding all. There is a love holding all. We rest in this love. We rest in this love. We rest in this love. We rest in this love.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist community of the mountains. To all of you who are joining us on Zoom, as well as those of you who are in the room with me now, we are so happy that you are here. No matter where we are, what we wear, who we love, how able-bodied we are, the color of our skin, or our political beliefs, we are welcome. I'm Grace Kendrick, your worship associate for the month of February. Our theme this month is widening the circle. So far this month, we've looked at the positive impacts of widening the circle. We've looked at what exactly lies at the center of the circle. And today we have the opportunity to explore more of the challenging aspects of the circles all around us. In recent years, most of us can attest to that challenge. Our family moved from the Bay Area to Nevada County in October of 2016. It was an election year, the election year. Our older children, so we have a blended family. We have kind of two sets, an older set and a younger set. And the older children who remained in the Bay Area are extremely progressive liberals and have histories, including starting and leading the Occupy movement in San Jose, as well as another one who attended the Democratic Convention in 2014 as a delegate for Bernie Sanders. Our younger children, who we brought here with us, grew up incredibly influenced by their older siblings, who it seemed that sometimes their sole mission was making the front of the newspaper for a protest that they were involved in. As a family, we were unprepared for the different circles that we met when we moved here that November. Over the past 5 years, however, I've come to see the differences as an opportunity for us and our kids to learn how to navigate the differences of opinion. We seem to be getting a lot of practice these days. I am so excited to be with you here today and explore this theme of widening the circle amidst more complex circles.
In our commitment to be in right relationship with the descendants of this area's indigenous people, we place a small basket of black oak acorns on our altar each week. In doing so, we acknowledge that the Nisenan people are still here among us today, though nearly invisible. And their story continues to be excluded from history. We understand that we are on Nisenan land that was never ceded, and the original tribal families have yet to recover from the near genocide of their people. As residents or visitors in Nisenan land, we support the Nevada City Rancheria Nisenan tribe in efforts to stabilize their people, as well as the campaign to restore tribal sovereignty through federal recognition.
Okay, so good morning again. And this morning, I brought a set of game pieces to share. If you have had an opportunity to look at them, you will notice that each piece has a particular trait that's part of a shared trait or a pair of traits. So we have pieces that are short, and we have pieces that are tall. They are either dark or light, right? They are either round or square. They are either hollow at the top or they are solid at the top, yes. So one thing that's fun to do with this game is to group them according to a shared trait or a trait that they have in common. So you can make families that way. So you can make a family that have 1, 2, or even 3 traits in common. But there's one particularly cool thing about this particular game and about these pieces. So I'm curious if there would be one volunteer who could come up and pick any of these pieces. Any one of these pieces. Would somebody be willing to come and choose a piece?
That's the sum total of your application.
Yes, thank you, Shanti. Thank you, perfect. So this is the piece that Shanti has chosen, and we can see that it's light, it's square. Yes, sorry. It's light, it's square, it's tall, and it is hollow at the top. The cool thing about this piece, it is the only piece that is in this that has this particular set of traits. So the only piece in this set, it is unique. It is like no other piece. It's kind of like we are, yes. It's kind of like people. So it's a lot like you and me and everyone else in the world. We all have a unique set of traits. And we have more than just 4 unique set of traits. Here's another really interesting thing about this set of pieces. Can I have another volunteer? Thank you. So I invite you to come up and divide these pieces into groups of 8 so that one side shares one particular set of traits and the other side shares another particular set, a different set of traits. So we have 2 sides. They're being grouped by a particular set of traits. I see that I don't even know if I can figure out how these are being grouped. Let's see.
Squares.
So on this side, thank you for helping me with that. We have all squares, and on this side we have all circles. So now we people have a tendency to sort ourselves into 2 groups. And that's understandable. But it can get us into trouble when we start to think of people as this or that. Are there some people here who can share examples of ways that we think about ourselves as one thing or another? So how do we do that? One thing or another. So there's men and there's women, there's liberals and conservatives, kind of alluded to that. An adult or a child, yes. They're short or tall. Gay or straight, thank you. Yeah. Yes. Black or white. So let's see here. Yeah, so we tend to do this. But you see, these pieces, they actually have a fundamental trait in common. What is something that is the same about all of them? Yes, they're made out of wood. And in fact, I bet the manufacturer made sure that it was the same kind of wood. And it's possible that all of these or some of these pieces were even made from the wood of the same tree. They are made of the very same stuff. And so are we. We are all made of the same stuff. We are all people, all human beings. We're members of the animal species known as Homo sapiens, the beings that know that we know. We are all members of the same human family, all different and unique, and we are all made of the same stuff. We are all people. And when we remember this, it's a good thing. It's a very good thing. In fact, it's so good that it's a sacred thing.
Grace, thank you. And Aspen, thank you. And for those who don't know, those two are connected. I've been in about a dozen rich conversations about grief in the last 2 weeks. One-to-one, heart-to-hearts with individuals searching their way through loss. Conversations with circles of people sharing the weight of their personal sadnesses. With a group of colleagues now allowing ourselves to dip into the wells of our own sorrow after tending to others for so long. I was with anti-racist activists just now, recognizing the heartache underneath their frustration and anger. And in the past 2 weeks, I've also been in at least a dozen rich conversations about joy, delight, beauty, one-on-one heart-to-hearts about unexpected forgiveness, about breathtaking sunsets, with circles appreciating the surprising and encouraging gift of connecting vulnerably to one another in the midst of the storms, and even via Zoom, with a group of colleagues who allowed themselves to breathe and complain and laugh for a moment in the company of people who understood what it's like to be in their role. I was with anti-racist activists reminding each other of the joy that has to be realized at the center of the work. The center of the work to bend the moral arc of the universe toward justice, if we are to be able to sustain it. Every conversation about grief also surfaced thoughts about joy. Joy and sorrow woven thoroughly through everyone's lives. I invite you to notice this morning, in this moment, that mashup of sorrow and joy that is you right now. That mashup of sorrow and joy that is you this morning. I invite you to notice and be present to that swirling blend, that woven blend, and to recognize the threads that most desire your attention right now, in this moment. I invite you to bring your tenderness, your enthusiasm, your worry, your hope to this shared community. For those of you online, if you wish, I invite you to type into the chat some piece of what you're carrying so that we may know, so that you may express it. For people in the room, I invite you, if you wish, to come honor this tactily and physically by taking a stone from the table, something representing what you hold, and placing it in the bowl of water, a symbol of the community that holds you. I invite us all to hold each other with compassion and with tenderness as we do. Later in the morning, I'll be drawing on the work of Peter Coleman, a white male researcher into human conflict. In my own study and reflection, I'm placing Peter in conversation with Adrienne Marie Brown, Black feminist, healer, writer, activist, doula, visionary, teacher of emergence. Adrienne Marie Brown uses a beautiful phrase in emergent strategy to characterize birds flocking together. It comes to mind and heart as I think about you in this flock. Of flocking, she writes, responding to destiny together, responding to destiny together. What a marvelous way to frame this shared journey. I invite you into a time of reflection, silence, meditation, with the words and the wisdom of Adrienne Marie Brown. Oak trees don't set an intention to listen to each other better or agree to hold tight to each other when the next storm comes. Under the earth always, they reach for each other. They grow such that their roots are intertwined and create a system of strength that is as resilient on a sunny day as it is in a hurricane. Birds don't make a plan to migrate, raising resources to fund their way, packing for scarce times, mapping out their pit stops. They feel a call in their bodies that they must go, and they follow it, responding to each other, each bringing their adaptations. There is an art to flocking, staying separate enough not to crowd each other, aligned enough to maintain a shared direction, and cohesive enough to always move towards each other, responding to destiny together. Destiny is a calling that creates a beautiful journey. May we indeed respond to destiny together.
The star of truth but dimly shines behind the veiling clouds of night. But every searching eye divines some partial glimmer of its light. The certainty for which we crave, no mortal ones can ever know. Uncharted waters we must brave and face whatever winds may blow. Though for safe harbor we may long, we must not let our courage fail. And though the winds of doubt blow strong, upon the trackless ocean sail. From honest doubt we shall not flee, no fetter in inquiring mind. For where the hearts of all are free, a truer faith we there shall find. A truer faith we there shall find.
Good morning. I'll be reading this morning from George A. Piger's A Stone's Throw. As I ride through Kandahar City's Sub-District 9, I see a naked, dust-covered kid playing along the road. That is not the strangest thing. But when he picks up a large rock and hurls it at the truck, I wonder aloud, what the hell? Who lets a kid run around naked throwing rocks? What kind of a place is this? Years of war and violence have produced a perversely unique system where hurling rocks at others is a legitimate sport. It is easy to become cynical, even contemptuous of those kids who throw rocks. However, we must not allow our anger to numb our compassion. In a place like this, compassion for a dirty rock-throwing kid is all that keeps us human. If our entire world, from our first breaths, was a closely circumscribed existence defined by poverty, war, death, dirt, and dust, how would we perceive the world around us? How different would we be? Maybe rock throwing would not seem so strange. My son has grown up seeing men in uniform as the good guys, not a threat. When his bunny rabbit died, he cried for a day and buried it in the backyard. That is as close to death as he has ever been. He takes a hot bath every night. He has ice cold water, juice, and soda for the taking. His world is secure, reliable, and good. He is happy, safe, and loved. That kid with the rock has never known the world my son takes for granted. His world is not secure, reliable, and good. It is dangerous, uncertain, and rough. Still, he knows how to throw rocks. It is one certain thing in an uncertain world. So that is what he does. Understanding this, my response is compassion. Compassion for a child who seeks to hurt me. Compassion for a child who is no less a child of God than my own son. I cannot change his world, but I must try to understand it. Otherwise, a kid with a rock is just one more kind of enemy instead of the person he really is. A kid who, like my own son, only wants to be happy, safe, and loved.
That was the voice of a Unitarian army chaplain. You may have noticed that people in the nation are feeling increasingly polarized, feeling not only pulled farther and farther apart from each other, but also more and more angrily, irreconcilably, violently, toxically, and frighteningly polarized. I know it worries many of you, and it certainly worries me. I know that it hits close to home with our families, our friends, and our neighbors. And I know that to most of us, figuring out what to do about it feels unclear at best, and much of the time overwhelming or impossible. Besides feeling dangerous and scary and generally crappy, that growing wave of the divide is fracturing our faith in humanity too, I think. Probably more so the more we have benefited in our life from the way things are. So the more you have been held outside the center of inclusion, the more indigenous you are, the more black you are, the more female, the more poor, the more gender or religion or culture or in any way non-conforming you have been, the more your faith has probably already been challenged, or at least made you cautious. Maybe it's even shattered your faith in humanity if that's your life experience. Some of the rest of us have had the luxury, the sheltered luxury, of remaining more naive to some of the challenges of human nature. Even though this religious tradition of ours holds that universal and absolute inclusion is the nature of the universe and the nature of God, this is not the first time our faith in humanity has been tested as a tradition. Not the first time we're sent back to the theological drawing board to figure out what the hell is going on and what it means for how we need to understand things and what we're called to do about it. Slavery, the Industrial Revolution, the wealth inequality of the Gilded Age, the World Wars, Jim Crow, the Civil Rights Movement, and the Vietnam War sent us scrambling to reconsider our expectations about human nature and our trust in human potential. So this is just the current theological crisis, ours to feel our way through for this moment in time. Now, my blue sources claim that the left, the Democrats, and the middle haven't really budged very much in recent years, and that the polarization we're experiencing comes from the red right, who's moved so far past what we thought were the outer limits that the distance is becoming unbridgeable. But it's not that simple. All of us play our part in the polarization, whether we realize it or not, whether we intend to or not. Let me try to widen the middle of the circle for a moment. In 2020, before the presidential election, people were asked whether violent action would be justified if their presidential candidate didn't win. So 2020, if your candidate doesn't win, is violence justified? 21%, or 1/5 of Republicans, said partisan violence would be justified if Trump lost. January 6th. Any guess on what the percentage was among Democrats polled who said that violence would be justified if their candidate lost? You want to take a guess? That's exactly it. 22%. Okay, slightly more, but really the same thing, right? Here's another. 80% of the Democrats and 80% of the Republicans right now view members of the other party as more immoral, dishonest, and closed-minded than members of their own party. And currently, both Democrats and Republicans imagine that almost twice as many people on the other side of the political fence hold more extreme views than they really do. We both think the other is more extreme than is actually true. So here we are. We have been sucked into the polarization despite our best intentions. Most people are members of the exhausted majority, as one study put it after the 2016 election. The exhausted majority. That was then. That was before the pandemic and before 2020. But here we are, trapped in a cycle that makes it harder and harder for us not to demonize, or at least feel colder about that other side, whatever the other side is for us. We're getting stuck and more mired by the day, but you know this. You get to experience this. As much as I would like to say, here's the answer, and even though Peter Coleman, who we'll talk about in a minute, does offer a set of research-informed answers that he thinks will help, what I want to do today is just get us started down that answer path by affirming first, so that we can let go of thinking it could be otherwise, that all of us are caught in the spin of a particularly pernicious hurricane, whose winds have now gathered enough momentum that this storm pulls us and darn near everything that gets near it into it. Things that wouldn't normally be swirling together if the wind weren't so strong. And this makes addressing the hazards of this time much more difficult than normal, maybe more difficult than ever in our nation. And I want to share Peter's insight that our typical tools for fixing problems, the tools we can rely on 95% of the time, will not work to fix this kind of storm, and in fact, may actually contribute to it. Now, in case that's feeling like a downer, my message is not to abandon all hope, but it's meant to be an invitation to let go of some of our assumptions and our expectations so that we can, over the next months and years, and it will not be quick, we can reorient our hope, reorient our creativity, our attention, our faith in humanity in ways that might help us find our way through these winds and keep us on track for striving for a world that is indeed more compassionate, more sustainable, more just, as this community's mission asks of us. So let's start with the weather. Start with weather talk. Now here I'm fleshing out my own version of a storm metaphor, but I'm really drawing primarily on Peter Coleman's work as I speak now. It's from his book, The Way Out: How to Overcome Toxic Polarization. Doesn't that sound appealing? It grabbed me. So Coleman researches, teaches, and he practices conflict management. And I appreciate that combination. He's not just academic, right? He's actually teaching others and practicing it around the world in the most difficult and impossible seeming human conflicts. That's the arena he works in. Now, since living in South Carolina on the very coast, I have since then paid much more attention to hurricane forecasts on TV than I did ever before that. I'm from Michigan, where hurricanes are not an issue. So you get word first that conditions are ripe over the Atlantic for something to develop. That's the first thing you hear about. And then you hear about a tropical disturbance that's been identified, which develops into a tropical depression, a little bigger, which grows into a tropical storm that picks up energy and speed as it moves over heated waters, and then becomes a full-fledged hurricane, which may or may not be heading right toward you. Our current political social hurricane did not form recently. It did not start with Trump, or the Tea Party, or Newt Gingrich, or Ronald Reagan. It has been forming and picking up momentum for at least 50 years, says Coleman. Seeded by what came before it, it began to take shape in the tropical depressions and disturbances of the 1960s. Those years of political assassinations in the United States, the racial reckonings that started, the unpopular Vietnam War, the anti-establishment social movements, and it has picked up energy over the widening geographic cultural divisions that have been expanding ever since. So it's been gaining momentum. Started there, right? The little thing, picking up speed. It has picked up momentum over all these decades because many of the forces that have contributed to it have a focus on self in our country. That's what's common to them, including a focus on interpersonal competition. How am I compared to you? And on social comparison in general. Things that, as you know, are sped up by social media, which is actually built primarily for debate, criticism, contention, comparison. Like a hurricane, the general rotation of these numerous disturbances in the 60s began to pick up momentum. And so more and more things got pulled into it. Anything that got too close to its edge, right? And because these growing gyrations became less and less about single issues and more about a growing complex set of things all swirling together, abortion rights, gun control, civil rights, deregulation, state militias, science, anti-science, vaccine, anti-vaccine, masks, the swirling and the centrifugal force began to spin people out into separate layers. Not based on the issues themselves, not based on the details or the facts, but based on the clusters of issues that start to glom onto each other when you're in this kind of spin. Making it harder and harder to separate out individual facts and accurate information and subtleties. Once the spinning gets to hurricane level, the rules change. The speed and the spin and the complexity pull people into this layer or that layer, polarized into such separate realities now that we are nearing a mass national psychosis, says Coleman. And from here, it's tremendously difficult to see or hear or understand the other side, let alone to build a bridge between these two layers. Plus, we humans can only take so much complexity. We prefer clarity and simplicity, and so when a complex storm like this is what we're in for a very long time, it overwhelms and scares us, and so as a defense for our own survival, we tend to simplify everything about it. We tend to double down on our ideas and our ideals. We look for a few trustworthy people. We look for super strong leaders. We look to prepare for battle. We think in either ors, black and white, ever more impervious to any attempts to change us. It's not the individual issues that are the issue. It's not Trump. It's not any one person. It's this. It's the spinning, the vortex that sucks everything that gets near it now into it. That's why some things you wonder, why is that an issue that if its whole side seems to be in about, right? It's because these got lumped together. It's now an us versus them dynamic that is more powerful than any one of us. It's why it's so frustrating. Fixing the individual parts that we can see are broken won't stop the spinning. This is what is known as a wicked problem. Complex, volatile, persistent, maddening, resistant to change. Many sources of tension, all feeding on one another with no single solution. This is different than most of the problems we face. We can address 95% of our challenges like a clock that's not working. We can open it up, look under the hood, take it apart, see what's broken, aha, address it, fix the part or replace it, put it back together, and voila, back to normal. For example, in ordinary circumstances, we can sit down with someone we disagree with, talk it through, see what the problem is, the disagreement, hash it out, find a compromise, address it, fix it, put it back together, and go back to working order, more or less. But this 50-year trend of increasing political and cultural enmity is not a clock-like problem that will respond to our usual tools and techniques. It's more like the hurricane, more like a toxic addiction that is stronger than we are, which we recognize but cannot stop or pull ourselves out of. Trying to fix it in our usual ways, or trying to fight it, in fact, or to flee from it won't work. It's too large, too strong, too pervasive, too different. It's not that the individual problems don't need addressing. They do. But when it comes to this larger driving issue of polarization, the starting place for us is to be able to find our way into something. The way to find our way into something better, Coleman says, is to recognize that the problem we're facing around polarization is categorically different from most problems that we face in our life. This is different. We can't use our usual ways. Coleman likens it to the difference between treating the flu and treating leukemia. They present at the beginning very similar symptoms, but they require very different approaches to treatment. And misdiagnosing is to risk tragedy. So to address the polarizing that is sucking all the others into it and preventing us from addressing the important large-scale issues that need addressing and a lot of people agree on, we need to figure out the treatment. We need to shift our focus from the symptoms, from those things that are maddening us, that we're riled up about, that we care about, to look at the larger context. What are all the forces from the past and the present that are giving rise to those conflicts? It's not about the conflicts themselves. What is giving rise to those conflicts? They are symptoms rather than causes. And I find that awareness helpful, calming actually, liberating, right? It helps me understand why the current moment is so maddeningly difficult, and why using our familiar clock repair tools are not working and sometimes even backfiring, right? You go to sit down and have a conversation, and instead of going well, it goes worse than normal, right? Coleman shares a recent Pew Research Center study which found that after sitting down with someone from the other side to talk about politics, a majority of both Republicans and Democrats left the conversation feeling even more polarized. Their goal was to sit down, find connection. They left feeling even more polarized, and that they had even less in common than they thought when they went into the conversation. Liberal Democrats found these conversations especially stressful and frustrating, right? Because those of us who identify that way expect something different. Sitting down together to talk through an issue is one of our clock repair tools. It works when the winds are like this. It works great then. It's based on our expectation that the problem is a difference in our ideas or our knowledge, and that if we don't agree, if we just sit down and talk about it, figure it out together, that's what will work. But in this stormy time, each time we try to make those connections and it doesn't work, when it doesn't work, the divide actually gets wider. It doesn't mean that we don't do it. It doesn't mean we don't try. It doesn't mean it's not helpful or even necessary. What I would suggest is that we would do well for ourselves and the world to realize that that's not the solution for the more deep-seated divisions. A piece of the puzzle, yes, but it's not the singular missing piece. And that once we're in the spin we're in now, sitting down together can help, but it's more like a temporary bandage for a topical wound than it is a cure. Knowing that going in, I think, and so adjusting our expectations accordingly for what's going to come out of that conversation, that could help us actually engage more productively, more helpfully, with less of our own stress and frustration. What do we think is going to happen when you sit down for that conversation? So this is not the ending place. This is the starting place, coming to terms with that fact, that the toxic polarization that is frustrating and frightening us right now is a different kind of problem than we're used to facing. And that we'll need to approach it differently than we approach almost all the other problems in our lives. It's going to require new mindsets and new skills and something of a leap of faith, says Coleman, because the tools we know best aren't going to fix it. Now, I don't want to leave you feeling hopeless this morning. And there's more to come, because Coleman does say he does have ideas for what he thinks will work, and I'll be trying to bring those to you over time. But I want to close with a few of his qualified reasons to be hopeful. Another way of kind of looking at what's going on and saying, oh, even in that, there's hope. So he says that people have been studying now these long-standing, polarizing, change-resistant conflicts around the world for decades. Actually, they've been working on this. They've been trying to figure this out. And that the research on how to end those divisive conflicts has taught us that three things matter most for getting warring groups to pause their battle and begin to consider other ways of resolving their differences. Three things. The first necessary condition, not sufficient, but necessary condition, is instability. Big collective hardship, scandal, tragedy, disaster, shocks to the system. Fortunately for our purposes, says Coleman, we are currently a mess. Reason for hope, right? It takes that level of shock to get us out of this spin, right? Easter sermon. The second condition for getting out of the hurricane, second necessary but not sufficient condition, is a stalemate that's hurting both sides mutually, right? So that requires that people believe that the other side is also hurting and wanting to find a way out. So, in other words, people on both sides have to feel really awful. The good news, says Coleman, is that today most Americans are feeling miserable about that division in particular, right? Hope, right? The third condition, he says, is that all sides need to sense that there may be a way out. And this is the piece of hope to hang on to for ourselves, even if we can't see it, right? Both sides need to have a sense that there may be a way out in which they can get unstuck, change course, and move on with their lives without having to lose face or to give up too much, to think that there's a way out. That's the work ahead. That's what Coleman seeks to offer in his book, A Way Out. Future sermons. May that work to find a way out, and I'm with you, let's hold on to that hope as best we can. May that work to find a way out, whatever it's going to look like, be our work too, ready or not, responding to destiny in new ways together. So may we be.
This congregation is sustained by the inspiring generosity of its members, friends, and guests. Together, we also support an organization doing good in the world. 25% of our offering this month will support Care Crisis Nursery, which supports children and families in our community and surrounding areas by providing safe, nurturing care for the small children of families experiencing a stressful situation. Allison will share with you the various ways of giving.
Your generosity remains essential to our ability to sustain the work of our community. There are several ways to contribute. You may text an amount to 833-579-0483, give via our website at uugrassvalley.org, via PayPal at paypal.me/UUCM, or mail to UUCM 246 South Church Street, Grass Valley, California, 95945. Thank you.
And may our contributions be an act of widening our circle to communities in need. And may this offering spread ripples of kindness and generosity throughout our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Grace, for being a worship associate. For those who are new, Grace is a newer worship associate, so especially appreciated for stepping in and stepping up. Beth online, our rock solid chat host online. Beth, thank you. And Siobhan was up because of the things we were trying to do today. Siobhan was there stretching wires with the ladder this morning multiple times. I can't say enough about our gratitude for Siobhan for both the skill and the willingness to do that. And Steve and Andy have been here several Sundays in a row as well. Thank you for holding down that AV fort. Linda, thanks for the lovely setting today. Your settings always have this calm. Where's Linda? There she is. Your settings always have this calmness to them that I really enjoy. Claire and Jordan, what a joy for the music and the singing.
And yourself.
Thank you. And thanks to Melissa and Beth and Aspen joining this morning, and Bob, Melissa, Beth, and Aspen, for the reading today, some of it online, and George and Corey for being behind the scenes. I'm going to invite us to close with a song. Like the quarto pieces on the altar, that's the game, quarto. Some of us are square. Some of us are round, some of us are shorter, some of us taller, some of us are dark, and some of us are light. Some of us are spacious inside, and some of us are solid through and through. And in the midst of our many different traits, we seek somehow to feel some sort of solidarity, right? Unity, familiarity. We would, if we have a choice, be one, feel like we're one in some way. The words of this song were written to celebrate and to support and encourage the merger of two different religious traditions who recognized that they had enough traits in common to hazard making a shared circle, Unitarianism and Universalism. In the middle of this incredibly strong and toxic polarization in our day, it takes on additional resonance and meaning, I think. I invite you to rise in body or in spirit, in the room to hum along, at home to sing along.
We would be one as now we join in singing our hymn of love to pledge ourselves anew to that high cause of greater understanding of who we are and what in us is true. We would be one in living for each other, to show to all a new community. We would be one in building for tomorrow, a nobler world than we have known today. We would be one in searching for that meaning which binds our hearts and points us on the way. As one we pledge ourselves to greater service, with love and justice strive to make us free.
We would be one as now we join in singing our hymn of love, to pledge ourselves anew to that high cause of greater understanding of who we are and what in us is true. We would be one in living for each other to show to all a new community. That was that first verse. For the closing words, the words of Reverend Rod Richards, you won't be alone. We'll be side by side with one another, with people yet to come, with partners we have yet to meet, creating ever-widening, perfectly imperfect, precisely imprecise circles and ovals and oblongs of beauty as we practice sacred flexibility, welcoming love and healing pain, and demanding justice and saving lives. Go forth Find your shapes and make some new ones. I invite us into this community benediction, this blessing that we offer, this reminder that we offer to one another every week. Together, let us carry the flame of peace and love until we meet again, hopefully soon.